development. Time for a little discussion. Let's bring in our political panel. Joining me now from our South Florida Newsmax TV newsroom, a guy who was in Iowa, the managing editor of the Shark Tank political blog, Javier Manjarres. He is screen right. And smack dab in the center is our friend from the left, Rabin-Havt, the host of The Agenda on Sirius XM Radio and a former aide to Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, who was happy he didn't have to show up in Iowa. And here at the anchor desk with me, my good friend Pete Hoekstra remains to be part of the conversation. You know, Pete, I think we better go to the guy who was there. Javi, yep. So you were there. Who did the best job as a speaker from your perspective?
First of all, I like the haircut, JD.
Thank you, pal.
But yes, it was. I would say it was Ted Cruz who hit a grand slam, if you would. Rick Perry did very well, as well as Scott Walker. And I think what audiences and also viewers on TV took away from this was we saw pretty much the changing of the guard here. We saw the new Republican leaders move past that old guard, which is the Huckabees, the Santorums, the Jeb Bushes, and the Mitt Romneys.
I just have to ask Pete Hoekstra a question. Do you really think we're heading for the changing of the guard in the party in terms of presidential candidates?
Actually, that's the first time I've heard that description, but I think it may be an apt description. What I'd really like to know is how'd Carly do? What was the response to her? I've heard that she gave a great speech. I haven't seen much of it. You know, that could be an interesting candidate.
Mr. Hoekstra, she did pretty good, but she was ran out of the media room during the news gaggle afterwards. She was peppered by some reporters on some issues that she wasn't, I think, too well versed on, and she just ran out of the newsroom. Kind of funny.
Well, fair enough. Let's go to our friend from the left, Rabin-Havt. Ari, I guess you look on with some more than passing curiosity to the cavalcade of conservatives who were in Iowa this weekend.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that so many Republican candidates decided to make the trip out to a conference held by, Congressman and noted ankle aficionado Steve King. I think that, it showed me, if I were looking at it purely from a political perspective, the only one that I would absolutely worry about as a Democrat, the only one who impressed me at all was actually Scott Walker, frankly.
All right, well, and why?
Well, I thought, first off, I think he's an interesting candidate from a Republican perspective. And in my mind, he unites a number of factions within the Republican Party. Christians, the business community, the Tea Party. He kind of has something for each of those buckets, which I find interesting as a candidate. Second, I think his major problem I've seen in the past is, frankly, I've been bored to tears by his speeches before. They're literally a cure for insomnia. This was actually a pretty good one, and that shows maybe he's stepping it up and could become a viable candidate. And frankly, I think a Walker-Rubio, a Walker-Martinez ticket would be a very scary ticket for Democrats to go up against. I think everyone else I kind of laughed at.
Well, interesting, laughter aside, Pete Hoekstra, to hear Rabin-Havt talk about Scott Walker, and we've had our share of campaigns, right. To hear that Walker really came out in an informal yet forceful way, that's the interesting development, I guess.
I always worry about my colleagues on the left who advise us as to what candidates we should be putting forward to offer us the best opportunity to win in the next election.
But it is worth noting, and Ari, you can level with us, just between us.
Yeah.
This isn't wishful thinking. You have a legitimate concern if a guy like Walker is atop the ticket. I mean, we saw what he did to the left in that recall out in Wisconsin, so you're not like gaming us, are you, pal?
No, I'll play the game. You guys should absolutely nominate Sarah Palin. That's the candidate who scared me. That is who. Her speech was spectacular, coherent, and hit every note that the American people want to hear.
Just a little bit of sarcasm. Javier, you were there. Yeah. Who is the biggest story we haven't heard about? We got about 30 seconds left in the segment.
That's it. I think Ben Carson did very well, but I don't think Ben Carson, is going to make it past a few months if he decides to run. I think this was all about Cruz and Walker by far. Perry, I think, will get past his oops moment, but is he going to be able to beat Cruz or Walker? I doubt it.
We just should note for the record that 3 big candidates stayed away. They could be part of the mix. And as for Ben Carson, he could organize. Listen, we're going to come back and talk more with our political panel right after this break as America's Forum continues. With my former congressional colleague, Pete Hoekstra, let's continue our conversation with Javier Manjarres, the managing editor of the Shark Tank political blog, and Rabin-Havt, host of The Agenda on Sirius XM Radio and a former aide to Senator Harry Reid, the Democrat leader. So, Ari, from the left, is the president pushing Hillary too far?
I looked at two polls in the State of the Union zone, and I thought they were really interesting. The first poll was in that liberal rag known as the Wall Street Journal, which showed that 58% of Americans favor absolute breaking up of big banks, which, just think about that, 58%. Then I saw a poll that the Hill newspaper was touting, which showed when Republicans were asked, do you support increasing taxes on the wealthy, essentially setting the wealthy bar, I think, at $500,000, only 47% of Republicans opposed that. So the idea that the president's State of the Union, you can go down issue after issue after issue and look at the polling on it, the idea that the president's State of the Union, first off, is too far to the left, and second off, that anybody can push Hillary Clinton anywhere is laughable.
What about it, Pete?
Well, what I'm interested in, Javier, you were in Iowa. You know, you have the president's State of the Union speech on Tuesday. He really doesn't speak much at all about foreign policy. And then all of a sudden you've got these Republican presidential candidates. How much of the focus in Iowa in their speeches was on foreign policy, Libya, Yemen, what's happening in Syria, Russia, and all of those types of issues?
Well, just about all of them pointed out the fact that President Obama refuses to call radical Islam for what it is, you know, and they all did. And again, it just speaks to who President Obama is and what were his thought process. Look, what we saw in Iowa, what I saw in Iowa, many of us saw in Iowa, is, I think, like I said earlier, the changing of the guard. We have more Reagan-esque sounding people out there that actually believe in what they're saying, whereas Obama, I think he's just saying whatever he feels is his mind. I think he's more in line and is more astute into trying to score points against Republicans and actually score points for Americans.
Peter, in the 2 minutes we have left, and we'll call in Ari on this one, we're going to talk about going from the White House to the House we used to serve in. Politico has a new article out saying Nancy Pelosi faces serious division like she's never seen before within her own party. Members of the Democrat caucus are complaining their party has no message and no clear plan to retake the majority. Ari, what are you hearing? Is there serious disaffection in the Democrat caucus in the House?
I think anytime you lose an election, there are calls for restructuring. There are calls for retrenchment. There are calls for looking at what you've done, seeing what's wrong. And I think the infrastructure in the House definitely needs to be improved, definitely needs to be livened up, especially in terms of how policy is created in that body.
Let me turn to Pete on this situation. So, Pete, we know Steny Hoyer and Nancy Pelosi aren't the greatest of friends. Will we see a moderate takeover of the majority of the minority party?
Well, we were there when Newt Gingrich was removed because we didn't live up to expectations. We didn't pick up as many seats as what we thought we were going to pick back up in the late 90s. Here you've got the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, leading the Democrats to 3 successive losses, in 2010, 12, and 14. I'm actually amazed she's still there. Ari, how is she surviving?
Got about 20 seconds, Ari.
I think she's surviving because the vast majority of the caucus likes her. I do think there are issues that she has to address, but I actually don't think Steny Hoyer is the answer to those issues, and I don't think many members of the Democratic caucus believe that either.
Fair enough. We'll have to leave it there. To Javier Manjarres from our Newsmax TV newsroom, our thanks. To Ari Rabin-Havt from Washington, D.C., likewise a thank you. And to my old congressional pal, Pete Hoekstra, thanks for being here on the anchor desk. There is more ahead as America's Forum moves on for this busy Monday here on Newsmax TV.